The game that we call charades looked absolutely nothing like the game today back in the 1700s when people started playing charades. A charade was a riddle. It was all words, it was prose, and you had to read the riddle and figure out by syllable what this hidden word was. Now, by the 1800s, charades had completely changed from all words to no words. And people began to act out and pantomime different actions so that we could guess the word that they were thinking of. And today, charades is still more advanced. Now we have all kinds of little gimmicks and things, gestures that we make so that we can get people to guess what we're trying to get across. So one of the ways we do that is if this word that we're thinking of is, maybe it's just one word or maybe it's two words, we would hold up a couple fingers, two words. First word is 3 syllables. This is how we do syllables. It sounds like, or if it's a TV show, or if it's a movie or a film, there are all kinds of little tricks that we can do, little gestures, so that we can help people understand what we're trying to communicate. Now, for example, if yoga was my word today, I would say it's one word, 2 syllables, and then I don't know, I could do downward facing dog or something, which I'm not going to do today, but then you could easily guess that it was yoga, right? So let's play here for a second, okay? Let's see if you can all guess this. One word, 1 syllable. Church. Oh, look how good you are. So exciting. For us, church is a building with a bunch of people in it. Not so much for Paul, but that's okay. So today, one of the things that we have to think about is how our faith works in the world, and if our words and our actions, our gestures, our motions are matching up. Because we tend to be really polite people who are quick to say, "Oh, I'm fine," when I'm really not. Just to fit in, just to be polite, and just to care for the person who we're talking to. But Paul challenges us in our reading to be the person that we say we are. Now, before we get into Paul's very lengthy and long and wordy reading this morning, we need to know a couple of things about Paul. One is that Paul, like many early followers of Jesus, has one eye on the end times. One eye watching for Jesus because he fully believes that Jesus is right around the corner. So when Paul says something like, if you're not married, don't get married. Don't worry about it. Jesus is almost here. Or if you're in a marriage that is just a struggle for you and you want a divorce, don't get a divorce because Jesus is almost here. So just persevere, be content right where you are because Jesus is coming. So if we know that, then we can understand a little bit more about what Paul is communicating to us. And some of his students later wrote passages such as, "Slaves, obey your masters," with that same thinking. Don't rock the boat, just stay firm in your faith. Jesus is coming, and as soon as he gets here, everything's going to be wonderful. He's going to usher in the realm of God, and the first are going to be last, and the last are going to be first, and we're all going to feel so much better. Now, the other thing we need to know about Paul is that he is always writing in response to a problem or a situation that has already been communicated to him. So in our reading today from 1 Corinthians, this should actually be called 2 Corinthians, because we know that at some point earlier, someone from the church at Corinth talked to Paul about a problem they're having with different groups getting along, and Paul answered them. This letter is a follow-up to the first letter, which has been lost to history. So Paul is kind of being a practical theologian here. He's saying, here's how you are church in the world. This is how it looks. Here's how you practice it, okay? Now, one of the scholars that I read, I'm trying to remember his name for you, Rodney Parrott. He said, Paul is walking this fine line between very conservative people, traditional people who are following Jesus, and also these enthusiastic followers of Jesus who are mostly slaves and women and people who were marginalized. Those folks found a freedom in Jesus and they can't wait to celebrate it. And the traditional folks are saying, yeah, you got to tone that down just a little bit because that's not how we do it here, right? They're both good Christian groups. They're both following Jesus to the best of their ability, but they're not getting along. So Paul is walking this fine line between those two groups. Now, if it was today, and let's say we have all the progressives on this side and we have all the traditional conservatives on this side, Paul might say to the progressives, good job on all your social justice work. You guys are amazing. Now, how about maybe you do a little Bible study? Maybe you want to do a little faith formation. And then to the other group, he might say, amazing job at Bible study. Every child in your family has 29 Bible verses memorized. Good for you. But now, maybe you should go serve in a soup kitchen. Do you see? We need both. We need our actions and our words to match up. And that's what Paul is trying to communicate in our reading today. Now, there's a part of this reading that I think is just fascinating to me. Paul says, to the slave, I become a slave. To those under the law, I become under the law, even though I'm not under the law. To those outside the law, I become outside the law. To those who are weak, I become weak. I become a Jew. To those who are Jews. And that's funny because Paul was born a Jew. I become all to all so that when I am in your position, I can see the gospel from your perspective. And I know what the gospel is saying to you. I know how you're going to respond to it. And I can help you. I can be there with you. And I can share the good news with you in a way that you understand because I become you. I don't become like you. I become you, is what he says. Now, what in the world does that mean, to become someone else? I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples this morning, and because this is Black History Month, 2 of my examples are from the Civil Rights Movement. The first is a seminarian who in 1965 answered the call from Dr. King to go to Selma, Alabama, to march for voting rights. And that person's name is Jonathan Daniels. Jonathan Daniels went to Selma, marched with Dr. King, and was so moved by the experience that he realized he could not just go back to his white community in the North. He couldn't just go back to his white seminary. He couldn't just say to all the people he'd marched and demonstrated with, good luck, everybody. Keep up the good work. I'm going home now. So he asked the seminary to give him the summer off. And he went back to Selma, and he lived with a Black family, and he marched, and he protested, and he worked with them, and he became part of their family. And then one day, he and a Catholic priest and 2 teenaged Black girls went to a store to buy something to drink. And a deputy stepped out of the store with a holster and a shotgun, a gun holster and a shotgun, and stopped them in the door. And by the time this deputy was lifting up the shotgun and pointing it at one of the girls, the seminarian jumped in front of her, pushed her to the side, and took that blast directly and died. That is someone who literally stood in the place of someone else, who took all of the hostility, all of the violence, as if he were her. Dr. King said it was the most heroic Christian act of our lifetimes. And yet, I had to look this man's name up, and I still haven't committed it to memory. Jonathan Daniels. Now, there's another man from the Civil Rights Movement that many of you have probably heard of, and that's James Reeb. And James Reeb was a Unitarian minister who made it his life's work to march with Dr. King, to work for civil rights, to include people of all ethnicity in his worship services in his community. And there are many pictures on the internet now of him with Dr. King and also praying over Black children. And he just was fully integrated into that community. And the white community could not understand why a white man would lay down his privilege and go be with those colored people, as it was. And so they waited for him a group of white segregationists, and they beat him until he died. This is a man, again, who stood in the place of and took the hostility that was meant for other people. Now, why do people lay down their privilege? Why do people step into the place of someone else? My professor, Dr. Ron Allen, said that Paul is suggesting in his text that that is exactly what we do, that we limit our privilege, that we limit ourselves to benefit others. And it is a difficult thing to do. Now, let me give you one more example from last year. In 2023, there was a Christian album top of the charts. And it was a Christian album that was produced by Flamy Grant, a drag queen. She's a Christian. In fact, she was a worship leader for years. And she loved the music of Amy Grant in the 90s. And so she took the stage name Flamy Grant. Because her album was at the top of the charts, she went to the Dove Music Awards. And with her, she had Derek Webb. Does anybody here remember the music of Caedmon's Call? It was from the 90s. It's probably the music that some of y'all's mothers listened to. But it was contemporary Christian music, and Derek Webb was a singer, songwriter, musician, artist that worked with Caedmon's Call for about 10 years. Last year, he began to work with Flamy Grant, and they worked on 2 songs together, one for her album and one for his. And when he found out she was going to attend the Dove Music Awards, which is full of the very same Christian people who criticized her for being a drag queen, he decided he would go with her. And he also decided he would wear a dress. Now, Derek Webb is a straight, white man who's married and has 2 kids. And I'm not sure I like his taste in dresses. But he did it. He went to the Dove Awards in a dress to be with his colleague, Flamy Grant. And he actually took more criticism than she did. Now, for some of you I know, as I am sharing this story, some of you felt something in your body, kind of a resistance. Why is she talking about this? Men do not look good in dresses. They don't wear dresses. They're not supposed to wear dresses. And what you felt in your chest, maybe, or thought in your mind, that's the same feeling that I had the first time I heard about Derek Webb. I couldn't understand why he would do this. Why would he lay aside his privilege and stand with, in the place of, a drag queen? Now, she was his friend, right? But there was something in me that resisted that. And if you felt it too, don't feel alone. It just means that God's not done working on us yet. But that feeling of resistance, when someone does something so outside the box, that is the same way that the white community felt about Jonathan Daniels. It's the same way the white community felt about James Reeb. They couldn't understand why someone would do what they were doing. And it's the same way the people of Jesus' time felt about Jesus when he ate with sinners, when he talked to prostitutes, when he talked to women at all, because you weren't even supposed to talk to women in public if you were a man. That resistance in us is a resistance to that overwhelming love of God that we just can't even understand fully. But we can notice it. We can notice when we're feeling that. So I have a couple of things I want you to do this week. One, I wanted something fun. So I thought, why don't we just all play charades today? Or we'll play charades at home. And we'll talk about when do our actions and our words match up enough so that people can guess who we are. Because that's what our faith should do, right? Our faith should look like and sound like the same thing and we should embody it. But that sounded too easy to me, so I want to throw out another action that you can take if you're brave. And some of you will want to do it right away, so wait, please, till after church. I want you to look up on the internet a picture of Derek Webb and Flamey Grant. I want you to just look at the picture and see what rises up in your body. Some of you will say, oh, that's amazing, good for him. A lot of people said that. But a lot of folks also said, that's ridiculous. What is he trying to prove? I want you to notice what comes up. Just be curious about it. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on anyone else. Try not to judge. And ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why is this bothering me? And who did it hurt? Did it hurt anyone for him to wear a dress to the Dove Awards? Ask yourself those questions, because I think that Derek Webb is a wonderful example of someone who is not playing charades with their faith. What he says and what he does match. And that's the kind of faith that Paul wants us to have, a faith that works.